Hey guys, Neil here and welcome back, and an especially big welcome to the 10,000 new subscribers in the last week or so. Thank you so much for trusting me with your subscription, and I promise not to let you down. In today's video, I'm going to be fact checking for you and giving you my prediction on all of this whole financial depression talk and whether or not it's true, but more importantly, what this means for you financially. Now, I know there's a lot of videos all over YouTube at the moment covering this topic. However, most I've seen are opinion-based and speculative at best, with a very poor grasp of economic theory. So I'm not selling you gold or silver or any sort of investment Ponzi scheme or anything like that. So this is going to be an unbiased video purely based on facts. So this is all going to be based on data from the 1929 Great Depression, the 2008 Great Recession, as well as the 5 measurables that economists look for when looking out for a recession or depression in the future, as well as all the economic forecasts that we have as of today. And as always, I can only predict based on the data I have right now today and looking at what history tells us might happen in the future. But even with all of these thousands of data points that I have, this is still speculative at best. And if anybody tells you that they know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, run away from them, because no one knows exactly what's happening, because this has all happened so quickly and a lot of the old rule book has been thrown out the window. So if you're a subscriber, you know what to do now. Please hit that like button below for the 60 hours, yes, 60 hours that went into creating this video for you. And remember to drop me a comment below as you go through the video, because I love to hear from you guys. I can't answer every single question because I already spend 2 hours a day responding to your comments, but you know me, I'll do my best for you. All right, with all that said, let's get into it and let's start with what we do know. It's already confirmed that a recession is unavoidable now. Of this, there is no doubt at all. But will we see a depression as bad as the 1929 depression? Some experts certainly think so.
I've seen some experts saying we have to keep the economy closed through June or July. If that happens, we will have a Great Depression.
And just for full transparency, as always, I'm not a Nobel Prize winning economist, and I'm also not Warren Buffett's right-hand man either. I'm just a guy that loves spending my days studying finance and economics. I know not for everybody, and then making videos from that for all of my friends and my family to take these complex subjects and make them really simple for anyone to understand. So to make this really easy to grasp today, I'm going to use some giant Lego blocks to cover the 5 main variables and then the 2 other variables which also come into play. I'll then be giving each one of these a risk score out of 5. Okay, so block number 1 then is manufacturing. So in the Great Depression, manufacturing actually plummeted 65% between 1929 and 1933. In the Great Recession of 2008, world trade plummeted by 12%, with services going down by about 9%. So as of right now, this is a huge concern that I have, especially with all of these countries closing their borders. It means that global trade has really ground to a halt in some ways. Yes, of course, there are a few things getting moved around, but it's a fraction of what really normally occurs in the global economy. So I would expect this to turn around in the next few months. That's assuming that certain countries don't have a second wave, causing them to close their borders again, really just having a knock-on effect and delaying this even further. Number 2 then is retail sales. This is the second block that makes up one of our variables here. In the Great Depression, retail literally dried up. It fell off a cliff. It was that bad. Compare this to the Great Recession, where you had a shrinkage in a lot of retail, but at the same time you had an expansion in other retail as well, like low-cost stores like dollar stores and things like that, and cheap fast food. Right now, retail has completely dried up with this lockdown, and I personally don't feel that the stats being given to us are accurate, with they're saying a lot of retail has simply moved online to Amazon. I don't think that's completely accurate. And even if this is true, that retail's gone online to Amazon, are opening up all these new jobs, that's not necessarily a good thing, because if you compare Amazon and their employees to everyday retail, it's night and day. Amazon use robots, they have mass technology to really compound on employees.
Or more precisely, the yellow shelf units hitch a ride on the orange robot wheeled units.
So where you might have 3, 4 or 5 employees in the normal retail sector, With Amazon, you're going to have 1 for that same 5. So this is not a good thing for the retail market and employment. But it's a great thing for Jeff and his wealth and rockets and houses and yachts and... Anyway, where was I? So on this point, I'm going to completely disagree with some of the media and some of the stats I've seen, where they're saying that after the lockdown, a lot of this income, a lot of this spending is going to move back to the retail market. I don't think it is. People are in debt right now. People are missing mortgage payment, loan payments, etc. So they're behind on payments already. They're not going to go out and spend as they used to before. Retail's going to get hit massively. And because of this, I'm giving it a maximum risk factor of 5 out of 5. And you'll see why in a moment. Number 3 is household income. During the Great Depression, we actually have the facts to show that manufacturing wages actually crashed by 34%. That's huge. Compare this to the Great Recession, where wages only dropped by about 4%, which you might think is tiny, but it really does have a big impact, 4% onto the economy and for most people's household incomes. Right now, we haven't seen any impact on wages going down, but I personally feel that this is going to happen. It's already happened. We just haven't seen the statistics yet, but it is going to happen. I do believe that wages are going to drop. And I believe this simply because there are now more people out of work. The unemployment figures are outrageous, which means there's going to be more people competing for less jobs. So this is just a simple economic formula. It's the supply and demand curve, and wages will decrease as a result of this, just like they have in every recession and depression in the past. With all that said, I'm giving household income a risk score of 4 out of 5. Number 4 is the unemployment rate. During the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was 25%. That's huge. Compare this to the Great Recession employment rate, which was around about 11%, which is less than half. And you can see the difference here. It is night and day. Right now, I'm expecting the unemployment rate in the US by around the middle of May, end of June, to hit around 10%. You might think that's crazy to even say that, but I've seen the impact and I'm tracking all this, and I do believe that we're not going to be far off that 10% mark. Especially when you look at the fact that 5 million Americans have filed for unemployment in the last week alone. In the US, the working age population is about 200 million adults. So if the figures are correct that we've lost, potentially 20 million jobs over the last month, and again, we're not 100% accurate right now because we haven't got the data, then this would equal 10% of the entire workforce. And I personally think that if we don't get the economy back on track by June time, we could see, call me crazy, but we could see 25% unemployment like we did in the Great Depression. Because the problem is, even though people say, oh, well, the economy will come back or the jobs will come back, no, they won't. They really won't. What's happening is a lot of businesses are either going bankrupt, and this month really is the crunch month for a lot of businesses. They're either going to go bankrupt or they are advancing and they're using technology to replace jobs. I remember a few years back, I gave a speech, and I remember all these supermarket workers laughing at me and ridiculing me, because what I said in that speech was, in the future, there won't be as many cashiers on the checkout, pushing all the items through. It will all be self-service and self-scanning and things like that. I said it was the future, and I even developed self-service kiosks for my own businesses. You have to build this yourself. So I'm just going to hit charge here. I'm going to just use contactless.
All right, order number 3.
That's good. People called me crazy, and then look what's happened now. You can't go into any supermarket or even a small mini market without seeing self-service. So I don't feel that a lot of these jobs are going to come back. I think a lot of them will go over to technology. So because of all these factors I've just mentioned, I'm giving unemployment the maximum score of 5. The 5th and final measurable is GDP, which stands for Gross Domestic Product, which in layman's terms, it basically means the monetary value of all the services and all the products that were created in a certain period. During the Great Depression, the worst year for GDP was minus 12.9%. Compare that to the Great Recession, where the worst year was minus 2.5%. Right now, my prediction for GDP contraction in Q1 was -7%. Again, people thought I was crazy, but now we're seeing the statistics and it's not completely accurate yet, but it looks like it may even be 8%. Now my prediction for Q2 is a loss of -25%. Again, you might think I'm crazy for saying this, but we'll see. I honestly believe it's 25%. I don't think it's going to be 10 to 12% like a lot of experts are predicting. But on the same note, Morgan Stanley's just come out and said they think it's going to be 38%. And yet no one's saying anything about that. So because of all these factors, I'm giving the GDP a maximum risk score of 5 out of 5. Okay, there's two other variables which don't directly count towards these 5 things, but they are still important. I'm also not going to be covering the bond market or treasury bonds or anything like that, like a lot of people always want me to, because I just don't think that they really add anything to this example and they only just complicate things further. So the first of these two is the stock market. In the Great Depression, the stock market was down, wait for it, 90%. Compare this to the Great Recession, and the stock market was down 50%. Compare this to right now, where we lost about 35% during the period of about 20th of February to the 23rd of March 2020, thereabouts. And so far, as of this week, we've recovered about 15% of that, give or take. So there's one other point that I do want to address, guys, because a lot of people keep putting this in the comments and it's not correct. And that is, people are saying that a stock market crash causes a recession. This is factually not accurate. A stock market crash has an impact on a recession, but it doesn't actually cause a recession. What this does is it frightens people in the retail sector to stop spending money. And since retail sales is 70% of GDP, which is this here, this has a big impact. But a stock market crash doesn't cause a recession in and of itself. And number 7 then, and this is the last point, is house prices. In the Great Depression, house prices dropped by a whopping 30%. Now compare this to the Great Recession, which really was a housing recession. Housing during this period dropped by 29%. So you can see the comparables here, they're very similar. Well, right now, a lot of people are asking me, Neil, what are we going to see in the housing market? Are we going to see a huge crash like the Great Depression, like the Great Recession of 30%? Because of the lockdowns in force, the housing market really has stalled, hasn't crashed despite the stock market around house builders crashing. So a lot of people are saying, because the house builders stocks are crashing and all this, there's going to be a housing crash. They're not correlated. They're not one and the same. Okay, so just to add that point in as well. But I personally don't feel that we're going to see the full impact for around about 6 months after March. And that's simply because of mortgage forbearance. I'm making a fantastic video on that. It's going to come out in a few days' time. But we're going to start to see the impact around the middle of May time to the start of June time. That's when we're going to start to see what's actually happening in the housing market. And just on that, I have got a fantastic video coming out next week on the housing market. So many of you have been messaging me and putting it in the comments, asking me, when is this video coming out? Because you've been waiting for it. It's going to be coming out next week. So just make sure that you're subscribed, and make sure, more importantly, you've got that bell notification, and that way you're going to get that video as soon as it's released. So my risk score on the housing market is, you'll find out next week. So the big question is, do I agree with some of these experts, these gurus, who are predicting the next Great Depression? Right now, my answer is no. But I do think that we are in for some really tough times ahead, and my opinion on this could change tomorrow if I get new data that counteracts what I have today. There's also one other major problem which I hope the central banks have thought of and the governments have thought of, because this caused some major issues in the 2008 Great Recession, and that is a run on the banks. Because what 99% of people don't realize is the bank doesn't actually hold all of your money as reserves. So let's say that you put 10,000 in the bank, right? You probably think that 10,000 is there in the bank. It's not. They actually loan out 90% of that money, and they only really keep about 10% on as reserves. This is called fractional reserve banking. A run on the bank really is a worst case scenario for any bank, and this is what bankrupted a lot of the banks in the 1929 Great Depression. This also happened in a 2008 recession, but the government stepped in to guarantee the savings of people, and this is what stopped the run on the bank. So really the biggest risk we have right now is people. That's the one thing you can never account for, what people are going to do. And as Isaac Newton famously once said, I can calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of the people. So I personally believe this is going to go on for all of 2020, and I definitely don't agree with a lot of what the experts are saying, that we're going to go into a strong recovery in Q3 and Q4, which in layman's terms means the last half of the year. Q means 3 months, so they're saying from, halfway through the year to the end of the year, we're going to have a strong recovery. Nonsense. Because if you think about it, some people will now be months behind on payments. Not their fault, okay? We've got to get this clear. It's not their fault. But they're going to be months behind on payments like mortgage payments, car payments, loan payments, and maybe not having an income anymore. So there's no way people are going to go back to spending as normal or even spending more. I don't know where these predictions are coming from either. This is just crazy talk. But will we see another Great Depression? No. At least not right now. Will we see a dystopian version of the Hunger Games? Again, no. So guys, you can go back to bed with your Netflix now and stop worrying, because as long as you're a subscriber of mine, I've got you covered. And if you've got the bell notification turned on, you're going to get an early warning anyway if I ever think anything's going to go bad. So thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you haven't smashed that like button 5 times by now, please do that for me now. I really appreciate it. Make sure to drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And let me know what you thought of the video. But until next time, guys, thanks so much. Be safe and see you soon.